Hi everyone, and welcome to our event Sex Addiction and Couples with Paula Hall. Paula, a warm welcome back to Online Events.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here as part of our Working with Couples conference. This is our second event of the day, and both events thinking about some of the most difficult things to talk about in therapy, I guess, around intimate relationships or sexual relationships. And I guess you're coming to talk to us about recovery and addiction, I guess, around sexual relationships. So not easy stuff at all.
No, well, particularly around the impact on partners, and how difficult it is for them and how difficult it is working with a couple. I mean, many of us might have experienced working with a couple where there's been an alcohol addiction, but where there's a sex addiction, it's even harder.
Right, okay. So challenging work, and
Yeah.
maybe some things to think about that we might not have considered, I guess, if we've not done this kind of work. So great to have you here to be thinking about this, Paula. And I want to say a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us live on the site. It's great to have you here with us. Paula, you're up for any questions and comments
Absolutely.
that people might have. You can see the chat room, so if anything pops in, Sandra's there to give you a hand to get into the chat room if anybody's struggling. So thank you, Sandra. And if you're not in the chat room or you're picking this up in the library, we want to say thank you for being with us for this hour as well. It's great to have your attention and be in the learning with us. Yeah. Before we get started, Paula, it'd be great to hear a bit about what you're up to. And I normally do a bit of geography, but it sounds like you're kind of straddling two cities at the moment, is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, last time I was here, we just moved to new offices in Leamington Spa. So we've still got the main practice here, which is where I am today in Leamington Spa. And we've got a big training room here. So we now have our diploma, which is our accredited diploma in sex addiction counselling. So we're using big training room for that, and then we do our group work there as well, and obviously seeing individual clients. So there's 5 therapists working here in Leamington, and I'm in London now 2 days a week as well. And there's a little team of us building a practice in London, and I've still got a therapist on board who sees clients for me in Bristol, someone else in Manchester, someone else in Bradford. Sex addiction work is really taking off, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you see it, and particularly amongst younger people. So actually, I'm quite excited that this morning I was speaking to a therapist who's obviously trained in sex addiction work, but very experienced in working with young people as well, because we are seeing more and more young lads coming forward, sometimes through their parents, sometimes on their own independently, with really difficult pornography addiction issues. So it's great to be able to offer more of a specialist service for that.
Yeah. So, and I guess as you're saying, well, maybe unfortunately, but there's maybe something about actually more people are feeling like they can come and get some help. They can.
Yeah, we're certainly talking about it more, I think. I mean, the media are very interested in the whole topic of sex and porn addiction, and I think that's a mixed blessing because the media doesn't always portray it accurately. But nonetheless, at least it is being talked about, and I think it is being talked about a lot more amongst young people, and I think that's why we're getting more young people coming forward. And often they actually find it easier to talk about sexual issues than others. And of course, my partner's book is out now. So that came out in September last year. So Sex Addiction, the Partner's Perspective. And so we're increasing our services to partners and subsequently to couples as well. So, yeah.
Great. Sandra and I will take a note of that, and we'll link up your book in the resource guide so people can just click through, get the book, and also think about whether the training that you do might be useful as well. Because I guess if we're working with people, we are working with people who I guess, in sexual relationships? And
yeah, I think there's a big difference. Working with, I think if you're working with partners of sex addiction, it's certainly useful to have a lot more information, and my book will hopefully be sufficient for that. And if you're working with couples, similarly, I think if you're working to treat the addiction, I think if that's really what the diploma focuses on. So if you want to actually treat sex addiction, you want to really help somebody get into recovery, then yes, absolutely, you'd need to do the diploma. It's very easy to work with somebody to help them understand. I think any good therapist is going to help them understand their problem and understand perhaps the roots of their problem, but actually working on the relapse prevention and really understanding the process of addiction is quite different. Otherwise, you just end up knowing really what's the guys. I really understand why I keep doing it now, but it doesn't stop me from doing it.
like the understanding doesn't interrupt it; it doesn't stop. Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Well, let's link up both the book and the training, so colleagues can get access to that, and really enjoy those resources. And so I guess we are thinking about the couples, and I know you said in your blurb, which I think is really helpful, like a partner finding out that their partner is addicted to sex or porn, or maybe both, can be as devastating as finding out about an affair. It can worse, right? Okay, right.
Much worse. I think that's the biggest issue that I hear from clients who've worked with other therapists who don't understand or aren't experienced working with sex addiction, is that it's treated almost as if it is an affair. It has all the devastation of discovering infidelity, and for many partners, even if there hasn't been physical infidelity, offline infidelity, if you like, if it has been pornography or online chat, the breach of trust is still devastating. And I think a number of things that make it very different from an affair. One is the fact that it will almost certainly have been going on for years and years and years. So, and most often it predates the relationship. So what partners find out is basically that the person that they're in a relationship with is not who they thought they were. Right. And I think another misconception. I mean, and I talked about this on the last event I did with you. A lot of people with sex addiction are not very sexual, because sex addiction really has nothing to do with sex at all. Yeah. It's all about this anaesthetizing behaviour. It's all about this way of escaping. So for most partners would say, and it's so common, he is the last person on the planet you think was a sex addict. Right. The last person on the planet. He's very quiet, he's very sort of retiring, I'm the one that's normally initiating sex, he's often not particularly into it, but that may be because of his guilt and shame that he's doing it elsewhere, as it were. So the partners are just, the shock is phenomenal. Yeah,
like they've no idea. There's been no sense whatsoever.
Absolutely. And again, this is what's so different from other addictions. You couldn't live with an alcoholic and not know. You probably couldn't live with a drug addict and not know. You probably couldn't live with a gambling addict and not know, unless you were phenomenally wealthy. This addiction has no side effects, or the side effects that a partner might notice is that they seem to be going off sex. They seem to be more withdrawn, perhaps getting sexual dysfunctions. So there's absolutely no sign whatsoever. So not only is there that absolute devastation to partners that this man, and it normally is that way around that we work, is not the person they thought they were, but also they themselves are not the person they thought they were, because we all think we're a quite good judge of character. We tend to assume we can do that. We particularly think we know our partner, particularly if we've been married for 20 years. Mm-hmm. If this has been going on for 20 years and you didn't know at all, what does that say about you? So the self-doubt that partners feel is absolutely huge as well.
That makes sense. Like we've chosen to get into a relationship with someone and not known that about them, and then it's continued all the time, and could really make us question our judgment.
Yes, yeah.
And that then can rattle everything in life, like the way that we see everything.
Exactly, because partners end up feeling as though they can't, they can't judge anything. They don't know anything. And the self-doubt sort of permeates on so many different levels, that sense of kind of incompetence, but also the low self-esteem that happens as well, because obviously sex addiction is very, very personal to a couple relationship. And I mean, most of the partners I've worked with would say, I could cope with any other addiction but this. Because there has been that infidelity that happens with an affair, but also there's the addiction bit, the fact that actually this has gone on for years and I had no idea. And I think the other key difference with affairs, well, one is certainly it's almost never a symptom of a problem in the relationship. As a couple counsellor working with infidelity, generally we would be sort of looking at how the affair is part of the system of the relationship, whereas addiction, nearly, as I say, 99% of the time predates the relationship. So this is not a symptom of a problem within the relationship. This has always been there, but it's not been recognised. So there isn't a before. So typically in couple counselling with infidelity, we might say, so how was your relationship when you first got together? Tell me about when you met. For the partner, it's like, I have no idea how our relationship was when we got together. Not anymore. I wasn't married to the person I thought I was. I just have absolutely no idea what it was like. He's always been doing this, apparently.
Apparently, yeah. But that could be an easy mistake to make as a couples counsellor, I guess, because that's what we would usually do. And yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, for partners, they will say that looking at the wedding photo, looking at any photographs, they can't really look at them anymore because where were you the day before that photo was taken? What were you really doing on your stag night? There's so much disclosure that often needs to happen. So yeah, nothing. I remember one partner saying very powerfully to me, I wish I could find out how much of my history is my own. Because that sense that none of her history was her own anymore. And the other key difference to affairs is that there very likely won't be an after. So if somebody is getting into recovery from an addiction, they are likely to be in recovery, perhaps for the rest of their life.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not going to be over. This is going to be somebody, if it was alcohol, they'd be abstaining from alcohol, they'd be careful at alcohol, they'd have to be more vigilant if they were going to Christmas at various events at the office do. If you're married to someone with a sex addiction, you're going to be staying with somebody who's going to have to maintain some sense of vigilance, who's going to have to be aware of their triggers, who might be all part of a recovery community. There's no before and there's no after.
That's quite a profound thing, isn't it? That this is a real part of the person that's not going to be cured or something. There's no, then it was always been there in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, so it's really helpful to draw those distinctions between, right, we might think, oh, this is like an affair, we kind of know what we're dealing with here. No, this is very different.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the question never to ask a partner is, how was your sex life?
Right. So why is that, Paula? Why is that the hot question not to ask?
Instantly, partners feel blamed.
Yeah.
Why are you asking? The answer is likely to be, well, obviously not good enough. And but otherwise he wouldn't be a sex addict, because that's what they fear themselves. It by the very implication of asking it, although it might be an interesting question at some stage, is that it's something to do with their sex life.
And that's one of the big things to understand here. It's nothing to do with the sexual relationship. And like we did this in the last conversation we had, but you really helped us to see it's something about the person escaping from their life and their need to escape, and how that is reinforced chemically within the brain as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that is absolutely nothing to do with their relationship with their partner. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, the quality of the relationship with the partner is likely to feed the system. So, I mean, particularly if the person with the addiction has got attachment issues in childhood, and that is part of the reason they became addicted because of those attachment issues, then clearly those attachment issues are likely to be around in the couple relationship. But it didn't. The couple relationship didn't cause the addiction. I mean, certainly the impact, quite aside from the trust, the breach of trust on the relationship is huge, because, of course, all the time that the person with the addiction has maintained this secret life, this secret identity quite often, that secret has been damaging the intimacy within the couple relationship. And it may be that from the partner's perspective, I mean, they didn't know, but the fact that they were married to someone who was a little bit distant, who seemed to travel a lot, or who were, may have suited them fine, but they never expected that it was because of addiction. They never thought it was because of that. And any issues and tensions within the couple relationship, of course, are going to impact the recovery work. And I think that's the other thing to be important of. When you're doing couple counselling, and chances are there's going to be a lot of difficult moments in those sessions, as there is in a lot of work. If you're not careful, if he is not also getting support and treatment elsewhere, he may be triggered into acting out. So there's got to be somewhere that he can safely talk, express, work through any feelings that might be raised in the couple work to make sure that he can maintain his recovery.
Right, yeah. So it sounds like it's important for the person who has the addiction to be in recovery, like in that support system.
Absolutely.
Maybe like a recovery community, or
it could be that it's individual counselling somewhere else, or it could be within a recovery group or a 12-step group or something like that. But I think remembering whenever you're working with addiction in a couple environment, you are very possibly going to be touching stuff that is going to trigger the addiction. And of course, particularly in sex addiction, the chances of them being able to talk about it openly within the couple session is very, very difficult. So to have, if you were married to an alcoholic, and an alcoholic was saying, I was really struggling last night when we went past the pub, it really just made me want to drink, particularly when we'd had such a difficult session. You could talk about that. But to say, oh gosh, when we went to the restaurant the other night and there was that beautiful waitress, she was really attractive, and I found that really triggering. And I mean, it's so personal to a partner, something like that. Yeah. When your sister came round and she was looking really hot in those jeans, I found that really triggering and difficult. Yeah. That's just not helpful for those conversations to happen in front of partners.
Yeah, it's so hard for the partner to hear that, because it feels like it is personal, even though it's about the addiction. I guess it's about the chemistry of the brain is getting kicked off.
Yeah.
But I guess it doesn't feel like that when you're hearing that in your relationship.
So so hurtful for partners.
Yeah. So that's like, if you were working with a couple, you would ask the partner who has the addiction to take that into the recovery community, their one-to-one therapy. Yeah.
And also, if you think about it within the couple context, the person with the addiction, when they are going to have their triggers, they are going to have their temptations, their difficult times, and obviously, hopefully, they're going to be managing those and maintaining some kind of recovery. And when they do, they desperately need kind of support and affirmation and well done, and that's really good, and what strategies did you use? That's fantastic. That you're doing really well. That's not going to come from a partner. And as a couple counsellor, you can't say, oh, you've been away on business and you managed not to visit a brothel. Well done. That's really good that you did do. Because as far as a partner's concerned, not sleeping with a sex worker when you're married is the minimum base relationship requirement.
Right, yes, yeah. You can understand the partner thinking, well, why are you saying well done? Why
exactly.
Are you... Yeah.
I'm giving you a pat on the back for not cheating on your wife. Well done, you. I mean, partners just like, what? But nonetheless, they need those pats on the back. That, if that has been something that's been really difficult, particularly when they're going through huge relationship crisis because it's all come out, and they're going away on a business, something that would typically be triggering, they desperately need support and encouragement and a pat on the back, assuming they've done fine, which ain't going to happen.
Right. Yeah. So there needs to be a place where that can happen and that can be sustained, but not in the couple's work, I guess. So that's really helpful, drawing that distinction. So what are the kind of things that you can do with a couple then? Like what? It sounds like there's really important areas to stay away from, not asking the partner, well, how's your sex life? And congratulating the other partner for not sleeping with a sex worker. Yes.
It's obvious when you think of it, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But of course, as you say, if the partner was addicted to alcohol, you probably both the therapist and the other partner would be like, "This is great.
Well done, you can do it. Well done. That's great. I think in couple work there are two very kind of distinct pieces, and I think the first bit is really just about containment. So if the news has just broken, and of course there are so many different ways that partners find out. It might have been a disclosure, although that's relatively unusual. Chances are the partner has found out accidentally in some way, and often they end up having to drag it out, really. So they'll get a partial disclosure. I was running a group last week, and so it was the guy on my course, and his partner had found pornography on his computer, and so he tried to say it was just the once, but in the end he confessed that yes, he'd had a problem with pornography for a number of years, but it would stop now. A few weeks later, or a couple of months later, she was checking on his computer, which many partners do, and found that he'd been talking to sex workers. He said it was just a one-off. It never happened before. It wouldn't happen again. Anyway, 2 months after that, she was still investigating. She started looking at the bank accounts. She found out he'd been visiting sex workers for the last goodness knows how many years. So that gradual disclosure is like trauma after trauma after trauma for partners. And that the initial piece of work, and often the way it's found out, so I've had partners who've discovered because they caught an STI, because they found very graphic photos. One partner in particular, I remember finding a picture of her husband having sex with another woman in their living room. So it's a really quite shocking ways of kind of finding out. So that in itself is kind of a shock, quite separate from the content. And initially, I think all you can do as a couple therapist is contain the shock. You've often got the person with the addiction with huge amounts of shame, remorse, guilt, and frankly fear about what on earth's going to happen. And the partner feeling the shock. That many go into rage, absolute rage about it. How could you do this to me? And I think that rage, I think it's important to see that as a trauma type response, since you've got fight, flight, freeze. Some go into fight, and I've literally got close to having to break up a fight between a partner.
Wow. Okay. Yes.
The rage can be absolutely phenomenal, but I think you have to see this as a fight trauma response. And again, another partner I remember saying very powerfully, she said, "I've become a stranger to myself. This is not the kind of person I am." This was a very successful, independent, educated, had tons of therapy woman, never lost her temper in her life, and was just raging. And was very frightened by her own temper. And then, of course, you've got the flight, those that just want to kind of run away, go into absolute anxiety, panic, huge anxiety. And then you've got those that will go more into the dissociative, depressive, freeze type behaviours. And I think as a therapist, you need to be very mindful of those extreme trauma responses that can happen. So initially, all you're trying to do really is just kind of contain it. I think it's important to try and help couples slow down, because often there's can the relationship work? will I be able to trust you? Can you promise me you'll never do it again? Should I leave? Should I stay? Should we still go on holiday this summer, or should we be cancelling it? And just slowing the whole process down, that there's kind of plenty of time here. You don't have to make any knee-jerk decisions based on what. And I think, again, any therapist, if you think about it, when there's been a significant shock, you'd be encouraging people to slow down. You'd be encouraging people not to make big decisions. And that's how I think you need to frame it, not to make any big decisions right now.
That sounds really helpful, because I guess the dramas that can come from trauma are really compelling, aren't they? And as a therapist, we might get drawn into that. But
Absolutely.
So just to see that this is coming, and maybe from that build-up of multiple traumas, it just,
Yeah. And of course, the other thing partners desperately want, is there more? Is there more? Have you told me everything? You said you told me everything 4 months ago before you told me the other thing, or I found out the other thing. So that constant need to know whether there's any more. The other thing I'd say that is really important, there's some research on this in the book. The partners who want graphic details, it's not helpful at all. And unwittingly, you can actually be adding to the trauma of a partner by facilitating any conversations about exactly what have you been looking at, what have you been doing, what positions were you having sex in, so unhelpful for partners to build those images. And I think often, what partners ultimately want to know is why.
Right. So if we can hold that in mind, that if we do that exploration, we might be re-traumatizing the partner like that. So that's a really helpful way to formulate that, I think, to see that reason. But it's the why that.
It's the why. Why did you do this? Why is what they need to know. What was it? They need reassurance that it wasn't about them. We talk to partners, and obviously this is important to know in couple work, about the 3 C's. This comes from Alcoholics Anonymous. The 3 C's are: you didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. So no, this is not your fault.
Yeah.
And actually, even if you were the worst wife in the world and the coldest, most withdrawn, most whatever, then most partners would leave you not to do this.
Yeah. That's the response to a relational difficulty. The addiction is not a response to the relational difficulty.
Exactly. So you didn't cause it. You can't control it. So partners will often try, right, I'm going to check up on everything. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'll try and be one partner, bless them, won't they have a load of cosmetic surgery. So some will try and control it by getting very punishing. Some might try and control it by becoming incredibly compliant. But only the person with the addiction can control it. You can't control it. And the final one is you can't cure it. If you become the most perfect person overnight or whatever, it's not down to you. Because, and I would say, if you think you can cure it, then that means potentially you did cause it. Because if you'd been more like that 20 years ago, maybe he never would have done this in the first place. And if you think about this logically, if you didn't cause it, then you can't cure it. If you can't cure it, then you couldn't have caused.
Yeah.
I think I'm saying the same thing twice.
Yeah. It makes sense though, like, to really help people surface their thinking, and so not drive themselves mad or drive each other mad in that process. Yeah.
And the other thing partners often say is when and again you often hear this in the couple session, they're wanting details. I want to know. So how old were these sex workers? Where were you visiting? What were you doing? What were they like? Were they prettier than me? Were they what? Tell me. And partners will often say, I have a right to know. I have a right to know. And my intervention there is always to wholeheartedly agree. You have absolutely every right to know. Yes, you have every right to know. But my concern is what damage that's going to do to you. How you're going to. So don't get into you don't have a right to know. Of course you have a right to know. But how is this going to help you? And often what partners are looking for, though they don't always know it at that stage, is reassurance.
Like that's what they're really trying to get to.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, you have to think about how you word it, but
yeah, okay.
partner will be sort of, wanting to know, were you sleeping with sex workers that were more beautiful than me? Well, frankly, the answer is probably yes. No matter how gorgeous, probably.
Yeah.
That's the name of the game, and of course you can never compete with variety. And the thing with, if you remember, the process of the addiction is the constant variety, which just keeps spiking the dopamine all the time. It's a constant variety. It doesn't matter how gorgeous a partner is, you can't compete with variety.
Right, because the same experience doesn't spike the dopamine.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
So often, a lot of their questions about what did you do is actually seeking some kind of reassurance, or it's a sense of I think it's a very interesting process. I think we often do this in trauma. If anyone's ever had the experience of either themselves or a close one being diagnosed with, a very difficult illness or a scary illness, first thing we do, of course, is get on Dr. Google, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like it's almost impossible not to, isn't it? Yeah.
And as much as we know the prognosis, it's daft, it's different for different people. It's all going to. Does it stop us going? What's the prognosis? What are the chances? How many years? And we will research like crazy to do it. And I think many levels that's a caring thing to do for somebody else. But actually, what we're doing is we're trying to get facts which will give us a sense that we know what's going on. And therefore we'll be okay, and it will be okay. In reality, it won't change the course of cancer or the course of the diabetes or the course of whatever. It won't. But I think it's a very human, instinctive thing to get as much information as possible.
Right. It's one of the things that we do when we're in a crisis. Yeah. Like as you're saying, we get on Dr. Google, we're scooping it all up, and we, like, the partner might be doing that with the details. How gorgeous are these women? Or
I need to know as much as possible, because then I will feel more secure, is really what's going on unconsciously. But actually, you probably won't. It may indeed make it much, much worse.
Yeah. And if we're understanding, actually, the partner might be re-traumatizing themselves, and we might help them to do that by participating in that process. Yeah.
I know it's particularly anything that would build visual images in their mind is unhelpful.
Yeah.
So I do some training on this as well, of course, part of the diploma. That there is a disclosure process that's kind of important, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But initially, the most important thing is actually just containing. And I think if you're working with a couple where there's children, I think there are ethical things to say about getting the children to school in the morning, eating. Are you just basic self-care, trying to slow the process down, basic kind of self-care, looking after yourselves. Partners need to know why. And the only way they will get the answer to the why will be if he has done some recovery work. So I think it is absolutely critical that he has done or is about to do some recovery work, because otherwise the why, the answers will be very, very simplistic, and frankly can make it even worse, because I was bored.
Because it's not going to be helpful, is it? No.
Yeah, because I was lonely, because it was there, because the other guys were doing it, because it's kind of that real top level understanding of why. Well, I don't know, really.
So he's not got that understanding yet until he gets into the work and starts to dig deeper. And so if we were tempted to work with a couple and he's resisting recovery, like that might not be helpful, might not work, or...
I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding of recovery, because what some guys will say, I really don't feel I need to, because I'm 100% sure I'll never do this again. And often that's because of the shock of the discovery.
Yeah.
My experience is, unfortunately, the pain wears off. And you may. But that's not good enough for partners, because it's like, well, if you could do it just like this, then why didn't you do it before? Why did it take this? Why did it take having to do this to me for you to stop? How could you do that? And also, partners have so many other questions. How could you live a completely double life and without me? How could you? So even going past, they're still going to have all the whys. And I think it's only by getting into recovery in some way or doing some individual therapy that they can really unpick why this happened. And I think obviously a critical piece of work once the shock's begun to wear off, if the couple do decide that they are going to stay together, is rebuilding trust.
Right.
And you can't do the work on rebuilding trust without him knowing why. Because how can you know and ensure a partner that you're not going to do it again if you never knew why you did it in the first place?
Yeah. Like the need to be soothed, the thing that goes on in the brain that is addicted.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be almost impossible for that not to take over if we're not engaging with.
I think if you remember that basically all addictions are symptoms of other problems, really. I mean, it's a pretty mega symptom for partners, but basically they're symptoms of other problems. And trust is built ultimately when the partner can see that the deeper, whatever caused the addiction is being worked on. Because you can never prove what you haven't done. You will never be able to prove that you haven't looked at pornography. You'll never be able to prove that you haven't visited a sex worker, because you can't prove a negative. It's impossible. So the only chance, what you can do is prove and demonstrate and give evidence that you are working on your anger issues, which is what was at the root of this, or that you are working on your attachment issues, you're working on your childhood sexual abuse that caused your work, whatever. You can evidence that you are becoming a person that no longer needs this addiction.
Right, that makes sense.
That is where partners begin to get the faith and the trust back. That actually your life is different now.
Yeah. And so there won't be the same triggers or the same strength in there. Yeah, the same push into that behaviour. Yeah. So that's also really important to see that there's something else going on for the person who's addicted. Like there's something underneath that behaviour, and that person needs some other help to find that, not in the couple's work.
Absolutely.
But some other help. Yeah. I'm noticing that question about modalities, I guess, in theory, and whether you use TA theory, or it's making me wonder, is there particular theories that you think of? In the last event we were doing a bit about attachment, and what do you draw on, Paula, for?
Having a therapist for 25 years, you just kind of I think you've got to know how to do some trauma work working with the couple. I think being able to recognise kind of the trauma, and obviously you've got to have the awareness of the addictive process as well to be sure he's not going into addiction. So I mean, a lot of it is, I mean, there's certainly attachment stuff that you're doing as well. I think because there's so much these kind of two phases. The initial is just containment. It really is just about containment, and I think transactional analysis does come into this piece a bit, because it's very common for the couples to really flit between he's the naughty child in the doghouse and she's critical parent. And there'll be a lot of abuse. And I think the other thing that's very difficult in the couple work is you really can't try and find equality. So normally we'd be working quite hard to find sort of equality within this. But actually, if you found out that your husband has been sleeping with prostitutes for the last 25 years of your marriage, hundreds and hundreds of them, and has spent tens of thousands of pounds, and was sleeping with a prostitute when you were having your mastectomy 5 years ago, when you were in labour with your sex, and all this kind of stuff is quite common, unfortunately. To try and get some equality is pretty tough.
That is going to be hard. Yeah.
And I'd say to the guy, you're in the doghouse. Sorry, there's you got a lot of work to do here. So there's going to be an awful lot of her in critical parents and him in adapted child going on. But also what happens conversely is sort of seeing that switch where she is also the absolute broken adapted child as well, desperately crying out for his nurturing parent, and they'll flip between her broken child and his nurturing parent. And again, the real paradox for partners is so often this person who's caused them the greatest pain they've ever experienced in their life is also the person they're closest to, and the person who's been their best friend, the person who's been their rock, the person they've gone to. So they're kind of wanting to go to this person for support and care and love and reassurance, but it's the person that caused it in the first place. So they'll flip between these parent-child roles quite often. I think another sort of TA thing that comes up quite often, and this is more in the longer-term work with them as a couple, is how often the partners particularly completely lose any sense of their free child. It's their ability to kind of be in touch with the free child. That's what we do on the partners work. By taking the partner out to do a separate piece of work, allows them to really focus on everything else that makes them Sally, big word, rather than just being the partner of a sex addict. Because what happens is that just is so overwhelming. But actually, what else makes you you? And helping them get more integrated in a sort of TA sense, and get in touch with their kind of free child. And the group work we do with partners is lovely, because the partners do get quite playful and silly and have a laugh, and often I haven't had a laugh for so long.
Yeah.
So long. There's lots of tears as well, but a laugh I do think is...
So you'd have a group with the partners only in, I guess?
Is there a modality for having a laugh therapy? I do think it's... yes, we do partners only groups, so they can see, and again, it breaks through the shame and the secrecy for partners, because partners, it's so easy to blame themselves and think, what is it about me? But actually, when they sit with other women who've been through the same, and just think, you know what, you're really beautiful, you're really intelligent, but this happened to you, this happened. Yeah, this isn't about me. They can, really help us break through that self-blame. So yeah, I think TA certainly does come into it, and of course, I think if they're parents, you need to help them get into that collaborative parental place for their children, and sort of looking at that, helping them get into the adult as well. But yeah, partners really lose their free child, and of course, for the person with the addiction, from a TA perspective, it's their adapted child that they've usually lost their free child completely many years ago. It's their adapted child that's been acting out.
Right. Yeah.
So it's very, they've been going off and playing with their porn and their sex work and their cruising, or they're doing whatever it is they're into. But actually, it's not come from a free child place at all. It's come very much from adapted child. So helping them kind of find that, but again, that's kind of individual work, really. I don't know if that answered Alison's question.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to think about the theory there, and also it's getting me thinking about, like, do you work with the partners as individuals, I guess? And it sounds like that's really important. Like, it's so intense when the two partners are together in the therapy room. Absolutely. To have that other space.
And some partners, obviously all partners are different, all people are different. Some partners find it very difficult to talk about the depth of their feelings, their rage, their hurt, their whatever they're feeling, for fear they might trigger him into acting out. Right. So and again, this is an attachment thing. This is TA as well. When any of us experience some sort of a trauma or a shock to the system, we'll go into sort of a different kind of place. And so for some partners, actually being able to be really open about how they feel is very difficult, because they're so frightened of actually driving the person away. So they do need their own space to do that.
Because it's likely we've all got some attachment stuff going on to some extent, have we? So it's going to be triggering that in each other, I guess, in the couple, and helping the couple to manage that. And it sounds like the environment. Well, of course, the environment's always so important in any therapy, but it sounds like your capacity to educate the couple is also important. So they understand the trauma themselves, and
absolutely. And of course, the issue that comes up in the couple work often is, well, is this really an addiction? And so doing some psychoeducation to the partner on addiction, and again, really, I think he needs to have a separate assessment to confirm it is addiction. Because if it's not addiction and he actually has just been, I can't think of a better word than a bastard, really.
Yeah, that sounds like the right word, doesn't it?
Yeah. Then actually, clearly, you want to be working in a very, very different way.
Right.
Very different way. But if this really is addiction, then helping the partner, or both of them, if he's not had any work, but understand what addiction is and understand what this means is going to be really important. And many partners will very much object to the idea of addiction and be sort of, so you're just going to say you're an addict, so it wasn't your fault, and see it as a kind of an excuse or a justification. Oh, it's not my fault, I'm an addict. And that, of course, that's not the case at all. I very much come from the position where, you may not choose to have an addiction, you may not choose to crave, which is basically what addiction is craving, but you did choose to act out. You did choose to make that decision to pay a sex worker and have sex with a sex. You choose to have multiple relationships, to go on the adult dating sites, whatever it was. You did choose. It doesn't take away choice just because there's addiction.
Yeah, to separate out the craving and the choice. Yeah.
And I think also helping partners, another question we get from partners a lot is kind of a I can understand that you used to look at pornography. I can kind of get that, and I know lots of people do, and lots of partners might as well. But I don't understand how you got from, and then make sure my hands are in the shot. I don't understand how you got from there to there visiting a sex worker. How that is such a huge leap. How on earth did you do that? And the answer, of course, is he got from there to there. My hands would be wider, but it doesn't work on the screen.
Yes.
One step at a time. And understanding the addictive process, how actually it started off with a bit of recreational porn, but then you got broadband, so that happened more often, and there was the stress at work, so that became more and more often, and then there was something else, and then it got a bit more hardcore because the dopamine wasn't being circulated. Then it got into webcam sex, then it got on to looking at the profile pages, then it got into chat, and then it became an infidelity. It didn't go from porn to having sex with somebody in one step. It's one step at a time, and all the time that process is happening with the boundaries. The glutamate pathways, decision-making pathways are reducing, the addiction's getting worse and worse, dopamine's going higher and higher, and of course the person's individual values are changing. One step at a time, it keeps being pushed. Yeah, when we break the speed limit, we all do it.
Yes, yes.
If you're going, we understand speeding, but I don't understand how you're going 120 miles an hour. Well, it went in 5 miles an hour increments. You didn't just sort of go boom.
Yeah.
It's
that gradual kind of, and then almost becoming acclimatized. Well, if you're in the car to that kind of speed, I guess it becomes normal.
The develops, so the foot goes down a bit more. Tolerance develops, foot goes down a bit more. But most people go, "Oh my goodness, there's no way I'd go 50 miles over a speed limit."
Yeah.
But actually, and the conditions were clear, I didn't think anybody would notice, and I didn't think anybody would, I wouldn't be found out. No one would get hurt. That's how it happens, just one step at a time.
So, like you knowing that it always works like that, you can kind of look out for that, I guess, and help the partner to understand. Yeah. I'm
just noticing the comment there from Nadia. Yeah, absolutely. I think, thanks, Nadia. I was hoping to get a chance to say something about that. Absolutely, the partners can be female. We still primarily what we're getting in the practice are men with sex addiction and lads, and more young lads with porn addiction. But more and more women are coming forward, but it's still a fraction of the work that we do, and I think there's lots of different reasons for that. I think it's much harder for women to come forward for help. The way that female sex addiction presents is often a bit different, but I think that's a conversation for another time perhaps. But the impact on male partners is absolutely huge as well. It's so difficult for male partners. And interestingly, we've probably worked with more male partners than we have the other one with the addiction, so we don't always see their other halves. And we certainly would have male partners in our partners groups as well as female partners. We wouldn't put male and female sex addicts in the same group.
Right, okay, that would make sense.
Work out why that's advantageous to the group dynamic. But we certainly have male and female partners in the same group. We've often had a male partner. And I think the thing that's very, very different for men who find themselves partners is the demasculization. And I think, and the sense of isolation and the shame. And I think some of this is to do with our social kind of discourses around male and female sexuality. So I'm not saying this is right, but I think it's the way it is. Our culture tells us that all men are sex mad. Yeah. Men often have affairs. There's kind of there's a sisterhood of women who've been betrayed, whatever. It's always in the women's magazines. It's on the television. It's in the soap operas. We kind of have a marker point for that. Whereas I think for men who discover their wife has been, or female partner's been a sex addict, there's women who have a lot of sex are still called sluts in our society.
Yeah, so there's very strong messages, isn't there?
If you discover that your husband is a player, a bit of a lad, he's been a cheat, well, you know, we've kind of got discourses for that. When you discover that your wife has been sleeping with strangers in hotel rooms, there's no mark. Yeah, that's kind of not in society's.
Yeah. There's no way to normalise that in the discourse that's here in the UK and the culture.
Yeah. So it's not about saying that's the way it should be, but it's certainly very different. Worked with a lot of gay couples as well. So I haven't worked with any same-sex female couples. I'm sure they're out there, but I haven't worked with not with a sex addiction. Obviously in other areas, but not with sex addiction. But worked with a number of gay couples. And I think, again, that's kind of slightly different because I think their context, their individual context might be slightly different. But
well, it gets me thinking about what you were mentioning earlier, Paula, around, so say we've got a couple, and like, how might you make that one of the partners is addicted or is just saying they're an addict, I guess, to get away with it or something? Like, is there anything you could say to us that could help us make that distinction? Or
not quickly. How do you want? Yeah. Well, I suppose the first thing I'd say is, get them to do an assessment. We can do tons of our work is via Skype now. Get them to go for an independent assessment.
Yeah. So they could come to you on Skype and have that assessment, and you would be able to help them know if they're addicted or...
Absolutely. And I think as therapy, there's no reason not to say, and obviously, with your consent and Paula's consent or one of the team, it'd be good to kind of be able to have a brief conversation with them to confirm the level of addiction and whether or not they think you should do some recovery work. And I know I would have said this on the last one, but there's quite possibly new people listening now. I do think it's important not to see addiction as a binary yes or no thing. Right. So is he an addict? Is he not an addict? I think we are all on the addiction spectrum somewhere.
Absolutely, yes.
We're all somewhere on that spectrum, so it's probably more of a how much of an addict is he and how much work may he not need to do. That really is what you're looking for. But I think unless partners, for most partners, in order for trust to be rebuilt, they need to see that there's kind of a commitment to recovery and that ability to really understand what's going on underneath. And as couple counsellors, slowing down the process, recognising this is trauma as well that the partner's going through is important. I think there's one other thing I want to say, and that's if there's anybody listening to this who's come from an addictions background and is used to the language of codependency, that with partners of people with sex and porn addiction, that's known as the C word. It's not... It doesn't work. I think, for me, codependency is a bit of a clumsy label for some kind of couple collusion, which, as a couple counsellor, every couple has their unconscious couple collusions, absolutely everyone. Yeah. The idea of codependency really comes from chemical addiction. and the idea that if you've been living with someone with an addiction, then it's kind of suited you at some unconscious level to live with this person with an addiction. But that's because you can't live with someone with a chemical addiction without knowing it. And if you claim you don't know it, then the codependency model would say that you're in denial. And there's perhaps an element of truth in that. But if you think about it, you really can live with somebody with a sex addiction and have no idea.
Right.
No idea at all. I mean, okay, so he stays up late for an hour after you've gone to bed, 2 hours, and checks emails. Well,
yeah.
Why would you think he wasn't? Goes away on business quite regularly.
Yeah.
So do lots of other people. It's you really can have absolutely no idea. And talking about codependency just adds insult to injury, frankly.
Yeah.
And again, in the same way as I think we're all on a spectrum of addiction, I think we all are in terms of codependency. We can all fall into enabling, victim, persecutor, rescuer stuff.
Absolutely. In all of our relationships, we have these dramas that we do. We don't realise what we're up to.
Yeah.
But really important not to confuse that with codependency.
Absolutely, and particularly after initial discovery, there will be some partners who go straight into helping. Right, I'm going to make an appointment with you, I'm going to book you on this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to help you, we're going to get through it. And it's very easy to think that's code, but actually that's a trauma response. That partner would be doing exactly the same if he'd just been diagnosed with cancer or something like that. Right, I'm going to help us get through this. Yeah. It's a shock response.
Yeah, I think that's really caught my attention today. I think there's lots of things I'm learning here, but just to really notice the trauma response, the fight, flight, or freeze.
Yes.
Whether we're working with a couple, or maybe we've got a partner in one-to-one therapy, to notice and to really work hard not to re-traumatize that partner, even if they're asking for that. They might really be. I mean, that must be hard as well to just go. Well,
and sometimes I just pull on old BACPs, do no harm, your safety is the most important thing. I've had a number of partners where I've said, you need to see your GP, and actually, again, I think you have to think of it in some respects like bereavement work, someone who's just lost somebody in a sudden, crash. You're just trying to hold the client, keep them in one piece. The growth work has to happen later. You can't get into coming to terms with this, what you're going to do, how you're going to move on. If you've got a client in shock, those early stages, and same with a couple in shock, you're just trying to keep them together. Further down the line, you might start talking about the growth, rebuilding trust, getting their relationship. Well, it's not getting their relationship back, because it never was what the partner thought it was. It's never been that. Yeah. Creating a new relationship with each other, but that is probably 6 months post disclosure.
Right, like this is not short-term work. Right. This is long-term work. It has to be slowed down, not sped up. Yeah. Paula, we've just with a minute or two left. The time has gone so quickly. My goodness, this feels so important, because I guess we might be working with couples, we might be working one-to-one, but just to notice those things that don't come to us naturally. Like if we don't know this stuff, we're not going to know it. So this is really helpful. And I think to know as well that we can refer on, like your practice is available. People don't have to be close by to get an assessment or...
Absolutely, yeah. We do so much via Skype now. And the other thing, do get the partners book, those that are watching, because we talk about disclosure there. We haven't even talked about disclosure, because also you can't start rebuilding trust if there's still a whole load of secrets that are going to start dripping out, because that just ends up completely sabotaging the work you've done when he suddenly decides to fess up to something else when you've done 3 months work on rebuilding trust. So how you do disclosure and manage a therapeutic disclosure is another very, very distinct piece of couple work that's worth knowing about. And we do specific disclosure sessions as well with couples, and then refer them back to their couple counsellor, so we hold the disclosure process.
And then they go back to the couples counsellor, and you could do that work on Skype. That could be, or
I do that face to face, but it's done over 4 sessions normally. So most people don't mind travelling to Leamington and doing it in a day. It's quite it's all detailed in the book, but it makes sense.
And of course, partners who have the addiction can come and do your courses as well, and some of them are residential. That's worth
based in Leamington, and London as well now. Of course, we do the weekly in London as well now. So
Well, it feels like there's so much more to talk about and so much more in the book, and maybe if you've got some time at some point, Paula, you could talk and we could specifically look at the book. I guess some of the things that we haven't talked about would be great. I know you're very busy, there's loads going on, but it'd be great to have you back to do more about that, I think.
Definitely can do that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you to everyone who's been live on the site with us. If you've been watching this in the library, it's been great to have you here too. Make sure you check out the resources in the resource guide. That'll be on the library page, or if you're watching just now, there's the link just below the video to get onto our email list and pick up the resource guide. And we'll have links to the book and to the website. Thank you so much, Paula, for making some time. It's been really great to have this conversation with you. Thank you. Till the next time we get a chance to work together. Bye for now.